With the HTML foundation and our CSS styling complete, now we can turn our attention towards adding some JavaScript into our theme as well. All right. As we've already seen, we have these folders in our theme that will include our main source files for each of these different technologies. And likewise, we have the main.js in our JS folder of our theme. This is going to be our JavaScript source file. We can go ahead and add our JavaScript here. Now, the default main.js has 3 callbacks that we can go ahead and use to add our JavaScript functions. There's the AUI.ready with the function in there. And what this is going to do is it's going to be executed after the HTML in the page finishes loading. Now, this doesn't include the loading of the portlets via Ajax, okay? But after the HTML finishes loading, this is where these functions will be executed. We also have the Liferay.portlet.ready. And this is going to be executed for each of the page's portlets or widgets. We can use those terms mostly synonymously. So after each portlet loads, the callback here is going to be executed, and it will receive 2 parameters. There's the portlet ID and then the node, which is the alloy node object of the current portlet. We also have the Liferay.on callback that we can use, and this is executed after everything else finishes loading. So you can determine how you want to add your JavaScript into the main.js using these 3 callbacks, or one of the 3 callbacks, or even 2 of the 3 callbacks. All right. So if we wanted to use the AUI.ready callback using some basic JavaScript, and again, this will be loaded after the HTML on the page minus those portlets. This is an example of what it might look like to include the Liferay sign-in modal and to include some JavaScript to show or hide the password. So we have that AUI.ready, we have the name, and then we have our actual function here. All right, now again, like I've mentioned in chapter 2, we have some other JavaScript libraries that we can go ahead and just take advantage of out of the box as well. We have Metal.js, which is developed by Liferay. I mentioned that this is an internal project and is not necessarily required for everybody's use cases. All right. We also have jQuery and Lodash, and I would encourage you to check out our documentation. And there's also some really great blogs by some of our consultants discussing how they've used some of these technologies in their own themes. All right, so I definitely encourage you to take a look at those, but you have these available and you can use these in the main.js as well. Now, additionally, with Metal.js, as I mentioned before, we can also take advantage of those ECMAScript features. All right. The important thing here is we can add a separate es.js file with all of our ECMAScript code included, but we need to make sure that it's actually included in that main.js file. So just like we've seen with the portal normal, we've seen with the custom SCSS, we need to include all of our additional files in that main source file. The same is true for our main.js. All right, so for example, if we wanted to have a top search widget at the top and make it more visually appealing, we can go ahead and add a top search.esjs into the JavaScript folder. And then we would need to import the Metal dependencies and make sure it's included in our main.js file. Okay, there is actually an example of this in some of the other themes on Marketplace as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at GitHub with Liferay's repo. You can actually find some of the source code for some of these other themes, and you can take a look at how they're using JavaScript in those themes as well. All right, and to include our new file, so again, if we're going with this top search example, in the main.js, we need to go ahead and run the require function. Okay, this just allows us to designate where the actual es.js file is, and we need to go ahead and include that into our main.js. All right, so let's go ahead and recap before we dive in with our own theme here. All right, so the global JavaScript that will be executed on every page needs to be added into our main.js. So just like all of the other features that we've looked at so far, if we want global JavaScript to be executed on every page, it needs to be added to the theme. There are, of course, other ways of adding JavaScript to the platform, but this is going to be sort of the big picture global way of adding JavaScript. All right, so that needs to be added to that main.js. And in addition, we can take advantage of creating separate files to go with more of a modular approach with our JavaScript and just simply require them into our main.js. All right, so we're going to go ahead and add some simple JavaScript into our theme, okay, to get a little sign-in modal in there. So let's go ahead and dive in and add this together.